What's going on, Orange Nation? This is Neil Adler with another episode of Syracuse Central on the Fan Arch Network. Hope everyone had a terrific Labor Day. Apologies for my stuffy sounding nose. Had a cold the last couple of days. All good. No worries there. Okay, so here we are. It's Tuesday, and Syracuse has got UConn on Saturday. Syracuse football, that is. We're going to do Syracuse football today and recruiting. So interestingly enough, or maybe it's not. I don't know. Depending on I'm curious your perspective. Drop me some comments in the comment section. But on Monday, when I was checking around different betting sites, so Syracuse was listed at least on FanDuel as a 6.5 point betting favorite over UConn at home on Saturday. And the over-under was 58.5. There'll probably be more points scored in this game than in week one because Tennessee's defense is probably a little bit better than UConn's. But should we be worried about UConn? They were 9-4 last year. They beat North Carolina in their bowl game. I can't remember. I think it might have been the Fenway Bowl in Boston. But they were 9-4. They got a good head coach with a lot of college and NFL experience, Jim Mora. They played Syracuse tough last year, didn't they? I believe it was a one-score game, or it was for at least for a little while. So 6.5 points. Now, granted, Syracuse is coming off a 19-point loss in week one, and Connecticut, in their week one opener at home, beat Central Connecticut 59-13, and they had, let me get this right here, 638 total yards and nearly 400 passing yards with 4 passing touchdowns. Look, obviously Central Connecticut isn't Tennessee, but Connecticut could definitely put up another fight against the Orange. And we know that Fran Brown and his staff will have Syracuse ready to go, regardless of the opponent. And they're going to be pissed off to some extent because they lost week one and losing stinks. And they're going to take it out on UConn, or at least try to. And so I think, we'll talk about this later in the week. I think Syracuse is going to win the game. Do I think it's going to be a touchdown or less? The whole spread, beating the spread, not beating the spread. I don't know. We'll see. So hopefully Syracuse will be a little more settled in on offense, not having communication issues. And again, they scored 4 touchdowns against Tennessee. But they had lost. They got to win the turnover battle. They got to improve on defense. They got a lot of things to clean up. But I think they'll beat Connecticut. But I think this game will be close, relatively close. So drop me some comments and let me know what you think. Is 6.5? Is that a decent spread? Is that too big of a spread? Too small of a spread? Let me know what you think. All right, we're gonna move on here to the Syracuse depth chart. Syracuse football depth chart for week 2. Their depth chart in week 1 did not come out till a few hours before, so I didn't really get to talk about it on Syracuse Central, but they did come out with it for week 2 on Monday. And as far as I can tell, it's the exact same, or at least almost exactly the same. But I am curious your thoughts, since we didn't get to talk about the last one, is what do you think of the depth chart? What do you think of the who the starting unit was? And, who the backups were. Sorry if I had a little audio glitch there for a second. Obviously Angeli and Yassine Willis and, Villari. I don't think any surprises there. The wide receivers, Justice Ross Simmons, Daryl Gill, the leading receiver from last year, Jonte Cook. Fran Brown said on more than one occasion that I think, 8 offensive linemen could all play or will play. And so right now the starters are Mack, Ferguson, Collins, Cruz, and Witherspoon. Some other guys that could get run. Okay. So no big surprises. On defense, you got Tank Wilson, Rooks, or Jobity as the tackles. Dennis Jaquez or Jobity as edge rusher. And then David Reese, the transfer, or David Omoperiola. Sorry, I always butcher his name. Omoperiola. He's good. A lot of them struggle, but I think he's got a lot of promise. But David and the two Davids, hybrid outside linebacker / edge rusher, or they call it the jack position. Okay. And then a linebacker, you've got Gary Bryant, the third, the transfer, and Antoine Delorier, who I thought that was the biggest surprise on the depth chart from week 1, and again week 2, if we're talking about context, getting the start over Derek McDonald, who's a redshirt senior. And then you got Sparrow in there, and let's not forget that Jamie Tremble, who was one of the highest rated recruits, depending on the recruiting service for Syracuse in 2024 class, is a tight end, but he's playing on defense as well. He's getting some reps as a starting or as a strong side linebacker. So curious about that. And I think Fran Brown alluded to that some in his press conference on Monday. Talked about Jamie, and he said other guys could play two ways, and obviously Dimitri Samuels is another guy, and then so we'll see about that. So I was always a big fan of Tremble's. Obviously, he wasn't going to get on the field last year because of Arane Gatson, and then Valari's really good, solid. So we'll see, but then you look at the secondary. You got the corners, Demetrius Samuels, the true freshman, and Chris Pearl, the transfer from Georgia. No surprises there. Devin Grant and Deuce Chestnut as safeties. Grant was a little banged up. Hopefully he's okay. Fran didn't really have a lot of updates on injuries. He said guys were getting treatments, but he'd have to get more information before he made any sort of official updates. Hopefully no one's out. Deuce played really well last weekend. And then you got Barry Buxton in the star spot. So, and Davian Kerr and some other guys, as backups that'll get reps. But, again, the starting defenders doesn't really, no surprises there because it's the same as last week. But, again, Delorier getting that start over McDonald, that was pretty interesting. On special teams, you got Trip Woody, the Iowa transfer. He's the starter over Jaden O for now. Stonehouse, obviously, all ACC punter. Fran's son, Fran Brown Jr., is the long snapper for field goals. Ethan Stengel's a long snapper for punts. Devian Kerr, punt returner, and the ultra quick Malachi James at kickoff returner. So, what were your biggest surprises? You don't have to say about this week, but just since it's the same as last week. But what were your biggest surprises? I would have the linebacker one. And, I don't know about surprises, but certainly you could make a case for some of the guys that are backups on the offensive line that could be starters. But again, Fran said there's 8 guys who could start, and you only start 5. So, it is what it is. Well, obviously, throughout the week, if we hear anything about injuries, knock on wood, or anything like that, we'll keep you in tune. So we're going to move from that to a couple of football recruiting stories. The first one being on Monday via his X page, Cameron Wilson, who is a 4-star edge and a top 300 national prospect from the state of Florida in the 2026 class and is verbally pledged to the Orange. He will visit for the UConn game on Saturday. And throughout the fall, Syracuse will be having a lot of guys on campus for game day visits, whether it's commits or recruiting targets. And Wilson is notable because he's been the subject of flip rumors in the past. I personally think he's locked in. He said that to analysts and in interviews over the last few months. He verbally committed to Syracuse, I believe it was like in late March. He's taken official visits to other schools, but then over the summer he officially visited Syracuse, and then the next weekend unofficially visited Syracuse. But analysts, I even was looking it up today, they're still, he's still in touch with, or let's just put it this way, those trying to potentially flip him include in-state Florida State, the Seminoles, and Nebraska. He plays at Miami Southridge Senior High School. The Spartans are 1-0, and they play later this week. And I'll definitely be keeping tabs on Syracuse football recruiting targets and commits, how they're doing in their high school season. So, again, it's encouraging because he has been the subject of flip rumors that he's visiting. I think he's locked in. But this is something that we're going to be talking about all through the fall until the early signing period. In early December for 2026 prospects, because they could flip, absolutely. And just like Syracuse will try and flip guys, other teams will try and flip Syracuse recruits. And that kind of flipping season theme runs deep for Syracuse in its 2026 class in Florida, because Syracuse has 28 verbal pledges. 7 of them are from Florida, and that's a large number from the Sunshine State. And, folks a lot smarter than me would say Florida probably has the most talent in the country in high school football, or, is in the top 3 along with a Texas or a California or whatever. But there's a ton of talent in Florida. And the fact that Syracuse is recruiting this talent and winning for these guys is really, really a testament to Fran Brown and Tommy, the GM, and other guys out there. So kudos to them. So, but guys to keep an eye on, because in Syracuse's 2026 class, which is hovering around the top 25 nationally, they've got multiple 4 stars and 1 5 star, and a lot of those guys are from Florida. So you've got Cameron Wilson, you've got Calvin Russell, the 5 star wide receiver, Miami senior Northwestern, um, Miami Northwestern Senior High School, and then you've got two other guys that are 4 stars, depending on the recruiting service. One is 4 star edge Jarius Rogers of Fleming Island High School in Florida, and then 4 star offensive tackle Javion Cooper, who's with Melbourne Central Catholic, also in Florida. So, hopefully all these guys are going to do game day visits and they stay locked into Syracuse. And Calvin Russell, as I've talked about yesterday, he was at the Miami Hurricanes Notre Dame game on Sunday night, but he was there supporting a teammate, supporting a good friend who played high school ball in Florida and plays for Miami now. So I don't know if he was necessarily, he's locked in with Fran Brown. I don't think it was unofficial. He is from Miami. It wasn't like he was traveling across the country, so let's not freak out. But we'll keep an eye on these Florida-based prospects that are highly ranked for Syracuse in 2026, including Cameron Wilson, because other teams might try and flip them, and that's just the nature of recruiting. And but I think Syracuse is good when all said and done. Will keep most of these guys, and we'll have a very good 2026 class. So we'll move from that, and then we'll transition here and kind of wrap things up. We're going to talk about a 2027 recruiting target, not a commit. And I believe I've talked about him on Syracuse Central. Apologies if I haven't. I know I've written about him for some of the other places that I cover Syracuse on a written basis, not through a podcast. But his name is Nick Lanier, and he plays at Miami Northwestern Senior High School alongside Russell. And he's a wide receiver, but he's a 5-star wide receiver in the 2027 class and a top 25 national prospect in the 2027 class. Calvin's both those things in 2026. And Nick has said in the past that he's going to visit Syracuse this fall. I've seen reports indicating that Syracuse is one of the top schools for him. But another one of the top schools for him, and this isn't going to come as much of a surprise, are those Miami Hurricanes. I get it. Yeah, totally. So not just an in-state team for him, it's his hometown team. He could live 10, 15, within a half an hour of the campus. And the reason I'm bringing him up today is because Steve Wiltfong, who's one of the top national analysts, he was at On3, but On3 merged with Rivals, so now technically for recruiting stuff, I believe he's Rivals versus On3 for college football news and transfer portal news. So anyway, but Wiltfong, who knows his stuff pretty well. I mean, he doesn't always get it right. No one does. But he logged a crystal ball or whatever the heck you want to. I think it's called a Fong bomb. Is that what they call it? I love that, by the way. He logged a prediction on Monday. I saw it on X for Miami, the Hurricanes, to land Lanier. Okay, well, first of all, it would be completely understandable if he chose the Hurricanes because they're a local team. They're a good team. They just beat Notre Dame. They could be in the thick of the CFP again this year, and they recruit well. Okay. Then again, he's 2027. He just started his junior year. He could visit Syracuse and a ton of other teams, and so we'll see. Just because Wiltfong did that doesn't mean that he's still good. Lanier could pick Miami and then he could flip to someone else, or he could pick Syracuse and then flip to, you never know. It's all fluid with this stuff, but I do want to bring up the analyst prediction because Wiltfong knows his stuff. And, it's relevant because Lanier has talked about his relationship with Fran Brown, the fact that Calvin Russell's going to Syracuse, and that means something to him. So I think Syracuse is still very much in it. I haven't seen anything about him announcing anything, but, we just follow the buzz, so to speak, and I think Syracuse will be fine with Calvin Russell, and I think assuming that happens and Syracuse has a solid year, they'll have a shot with Nick Lanier. But Miami, if they have a good year, they're going to have a great shot with him too. That's just the nature of the beast, and he's a Florida guy and Florida-based prospect, and Miami's in Florida. So, it is what it is, but we'll keep tabs on Nick's recruitment, obviously follow what's going on with Calvin and other Miami Northwestern guys. But did want to wrap up on that note. So I hope you enjoyed the show. Drop me comments. Let me know what you liked, you didn't like. This is Neil Adler for Syracuse Central on the Fan Arch Network. Thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate all feedback and your time. Really enjoying myself talking about my alma mater. And I will talk to you again tomorrow, friends. Take care.